Welcome back.
Okay, and then there was a two successor state solution, which would basically have the UN recognize both the PRC and the so-called ROC as founding members of the UN. Now, Dulles suggested having the PRC on the Security Council and the so-called ROC in the General Assembly. But and then we can see from all these solutions that the U.S. was conspiring to create two Chinas out of the cross-strait situation. So, on September 23rd, Zhou Enlai said that all of these solutions are an attempt to undermine China's territorial integrity. So, and then at the same time, Chiang Kai-shek, though he was anti-PRC, was also against these solutions. He, we can see from his relationship with the U.S. that he welcomed only U.S. aid, but not being bossed around by the U.S. And he saw anti-communism as the basis for his partnership with the U.S. He was strongly against all forms of U.S. intervention in Chinese politics. He wanted their money, but he wanted their support, but he wanted to be the guy in charge when it came to China. And his goal was to use the U.S. to attain his goal of reclaiming the mainland. So on October 16th, Chiang Kai-shek says Taiwan will never be neutral and it will always stand resolutely against communism and will never give up on returning to the mainland. And then around this time, the so-called foreign minister of the so-called ROC, Ye Gongchao, says the mainland is legally Chinese territory. Therefore, the KMT will launch an attack on the communists whenever it wants, and no foreign power can stop us. So, like I said, you have two competing entities that saw themselves as the rightful government of China. So, this was when Mao made the decision to liberate Dachen. And I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Dachen is an island off of Zhejiang province. And in September of 1951, the KMT created a guerrilla command post there. Because there were no regular soldiers on Dachen when mainland China was liberated. Just individual soldiers in squads, just individual soldiers who swam there, as well as like others who had reasons to escape the PLA. For example, landlords, bandits, criminals. Okay, now back to 1954. October 28th, the PLA shells Zhejiang province's Yijiangshan Island. And on November 1st, the PLA Air Force bombs KMT warships for 5 days. And later that month, on November 14th, the KMT Navy's Taiping Hao warship, which was the main force of the Navy, is sunk by the PLA Navy at Yushanxi Nanhai.
So this important thing to note: the Yijiangshan battle is the first time the PLA has an integrated attack among its Navy, Air Force, and I think amphibious landing force. Because now by now PLA is starting to develop its own navy and its own air force to counter the KMT forces.
Yep. And then later that month, the U.S. sends a fleet of F-86 warplanes, and Dulles says that the U.S. must respond to communist provocations. And then December 2nd, the so-called foreign minister Ye Gongchao signs the Mutual Defense Treaty with Dulles in Washington, which provided the U.S. with legal precedents to station forces in Taiwan. And so Chiang Kai-shek started thinking that with this new protective shield, Mao would stop messing with him and wouldn't attack any more KMT-controlled islands. Now, the same treaty was condemned as illegal by Zhou Enlai on December 8th. And he said that it was an attempt for the U.S. to provide legal justification for its imperialist aggression in Taiwan. So, 1955, PLA liberates a bunch of offshore islands, and then January 24th, 1955, Zhou Enlai tells the U.S. to fuck off, saying that whether or not the PLA engages or disengages with Chiang Kai-shek's military is a domestic affair. And in response, on January 26th and 28th, the Senate and the House respectively passed the Formosa Resolution of 1955, and Eisenhower signs it on the 29th. And this resolution gave the U.S. president the authority to, I quote, employ the armed forces of the United States as deemed necessary for the specific purpose of securing and protecting Formosa and the Pescadores against armed attack by the communists. So, and then January 26th, the U.S. attempts to pass a resolution recognizing the existence of two Chinas. And then the UN invites the PRC to join the meeting, but then the PRC declines, saying that since the so-called ROC is there, its attendance would mean the tacit approval of two Chinas. So, like, Zhou Enlai just keeps on maintaining his position, saying that the resolution is an attempt to cover up U.S. aggression against China. But what might surprise some of the listeners is that Chiang Kai-shek actually agrees and says that the mainland and Taiwan are both Chinese territory. And I want everyone to know that the Chinese people and government will not allow anyone to split the territory of the Republic of China. There are ulterior motives in misrepresenting Taiwan's status, and two Chinas is a ridiculous stance. So the resolution is buried. And then this leaves us with the problem mentioned earlier that the Mutual Defense Treaty only covers Taiwan and Penghu, which basically means that the U.S. wants Chiang Kai-shek to give up the offshore islands on the other side of the strait. So, okay, I shit you not. Chiang Kai-shek sends his son Jiang Jingguo to Dachen to carry out what is called Operation King Kong, 金刚计划. And under Operation King Kong, all of the residents of Dachen were relocated to Taiwan with the assistance of the 7th Fleet. And then shortly after, the PLA liberates Dachen, and then later that month, they liberate more islands. And then Washington thought that Jinmen and Mazu were next. Jinmen is the island that's across from Xiamen in Fujian province, and Mazu is an island right across from Fuzhou, which is a little bit more north of the same province. Eisenhower tells Chiang Kai-shek to retreat from Jinmen and Mazu and defend Taiwan, and then his intention was for the Taiwan Strait itself to be the line of separation between the two Chinese governments. And because with the separation that wide, it would basically be the creation of two Chinas or an independent Taiwan. So, and then March 17th, the U.S. sends 22 landing ships to Taiwan to show its goodwill. And Dulles really wants Chiang Kai-shek to give up Jinmen and Mazu around this time. But Chiang Kai-shek refused because he knew that giving up mainland China for good, and he knew that giving up Jinmen and Mazu would mean that he would signal that he's giving up mainland China for good and that he's conceding to the two China solution. Whereas Jinmen and Mazu, from his perspective and for his propaganda purposes, were supposed to be springboards for the recapturing of the mainland. So Chiang Kai-shek convinces Dulles that it was absolutely necessary to defend Jinmen and Mazu. And then Dulles convinces Eisenhower to at least temporarily stop telling Chiang Kai-shek to retreat from the two islands. And then Eisenhower once again says that, drops another nuclear threat, saying that if the communists go to Jinmen or Mazu, the U.S. will use nukes. And Mao, being the type of guy who likes to call out the U.S.'s bluff, decided to play around and see if the U.S. really meant it. So, anyways, he thought that at this point, Mao was starting to think that limiting the KMT's area of power to Taiwan, Jinmen, Penghu, Mazu was enough. And that Jinmen and Mazu could be seen as like one whole unit with Taiwan to be liberated altogether. And this was partly to maintain the legitimacy of one China. And international pressure gets Eisenhower to announce on April 26th that he's willing to negotiate with Beijing on ending hostilities. And
for people who are not familiar with this part of southeastern China geography, Jinmen and Mazu are a bunch of islands that on the mainland side of the Taiwan Strait, right? So they're just offshore islands off the coast of mainland China. They're actually on the mainland side of the Taiwan Strait. So the KMT government control Taiwan, Penghu Islands in the middle of the Taiwan Strait, and couple island, Jinmen and Mazu, across the Taiwan Strait on basically on the side of Fujian province.
From you can actually swim to mainland China from either Jinmen or Mazu. I
Yeah,
wouldn't advise it, but it's doable.
with basketball as flotation device, as a famous World Bank economist. What's his name? Lin, um, something something. I think Justin Lin. He used to be like a model Taiwanese soldier stationed in Jinmen, and he in 19 I think 1979 or 1980 he swam across using two basketball as flotation device.
Nice. Anyways, Chiang Kai-shek is pissed, and his foreign minister says that such action will. He basically says, "Okay, well, if you do this, then I'm not going to be friends with you anymore." To the U.S. So then, I think we mentioned in the last episode, the U.S. at first wanted to replace Chiang Kai-shek with Sun Liren, but then the the chair of Taiwan province, Wu Guozhen, became their choice. So Chiang Kai-shek, being Chiang Kai-shek, exiles him from Taiwan. So then on May 31st, you start to see a little bit of a shift in mainland China's attitude towards the Taiwan issue. Zhou Enlai announces that the liberation of Taiwan can be done in two possible manners: through war or through peaceful means. So this change actually impacted Taiwan's stock market, and stock prices soared because I guess people don't like war. And he reiterates that Sino-U.S. relations are foreign relations, but issues between the PRC and the Chang ruling regime are domestic affairs. And he also emphasizes that the PRC is willing to negotiate with the U.S., but it won't negotiate a ceasefire with the U.S. since there is no war with the U.S. So then the Central Committee writes a letter to Chiang Kai-shek saying that they'll reunify China on the international stage, but let Chiang Kai-shek administer Taiwan, including his military, and tells him that they hope he gets to visit his hometown, Fenghua, after reunification. And Chiang Kai-shek, being a very traditional Chinese man who hasn't been back to his hometown, was very this kind of struck a chord with him because it's a big deal in Chinese culture to go to your ancestors' tombs and to sweep them and maintain them and pay your respects, and he hasn't been able to do so for a really long time.
Yeah, the
So
last
then,
time he did it was 1949, just before he flew to Taiwan.
yeah, so secret talks between the KMT and the CCP went on during this time, despite Chiang Kai-shek saying he'll never negotiate with communists. So the third collaboration between the nationalists and the communists was raised by the CCP. This refers to the first time being and it was the fight against the warlords. The second time was the unification to fight against the Japanese invaders. So
Yeah, the first time was when Sun Yat-sen formed his Canton government in 1920s, receiving the Soviet support. The second time was uh, during the Japanese invasion after Marshal Zhang Xueliang staged the Xi'an incident, the coup, when he arrested Chiang Kai-shek and forced Chiang Kai-shek to agree to fight Japanese together with communists. Uh, so, so this would be, I guess, the third time.
yeah, so the next part starts getting kind of funny. So then there are bourgeois liberal elements in Taiwan who have connections with Washington, and they were pissed. And a group of people led by the so-called National Policy Advisor Lei Zhen wanted to limit Zhang's terms. So what does Zhang do? Chiang Kai-shek kicks him out of the party, and then at
Yeah,
this
it's funny because at this time, I remember in the 1990s, when I was spending most of my time in Chicago Public Library, there was a publication called Free China Pictorial. It was basically published in Taiwan, as I figure out very quickly. And but basically before 90s, Taiwan was not free nor a democracy. It's a dictatorship run by the Jiang family.
But you know why it's called a democracy? Because the National Assembly was elected in 1947. But I mean, to be democratic, you needed elections. But then what Chiang Kai shek did was say that, well, our country is not reunified, and most of the citizens are under are being what's the word 沦陷.
Occupied by the communists.
Yeah, they were occupied by the communists. So until reunification, we can't elect the National Assembly because we only have like 3/1000ths of Chinese territory under our control.
Yes, and also the so-called 1947 election, Chiang Kai-shek staged that specifically to grant himself legitimacy because that's when Jiang decided to basically launch full-scale Chinese civil war, and he did not want to enter into a coalition government with the communists. So he held his own, basically the show trial, so-called elections, and that's the only election he ever had.
Yeah, and then because there were no more elections in the so-called National Assembly, even when they relocated to Taiwan, that was also another issue because it was, needless to say, it was dominated by mainlanders. So then you at the top level of government in Taiwan, you had no like Taiwanese people. They were all like people who relocated to Taiwan between 1945 and like the mid 1950s. And it's like not just mainlanders in general, but like the elite among the mainlanders.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I think when we talked before the show that the a lot of times the kind of the class division are masked
It's yeah,
by the
obfuscated.
tension between the mainlanders versus the so-called the Taiwanese, because a lot most majority of the mainlanders who follow Chiang Kai-shek's regime to Taiwan are not rich, they're not elite, they're
They were poor.
poor. Yeah, they're poor working class or peasant background, and they were just basically either in the army to make a living or kind of was gang pressed into to conscripted into the army, and they were forced by circumstances to end up on Taiwan.
But then, like when you have anti-mainland sentiments, it's them who bear the brunt of it.
Exactly, because they're the most visible,
Yeah,
the most visible reminder of kind of the mainland presence in Taiwan. Whereas the Chiang Kai-shek's officials, they're well protected behind their compound, residential compound with guards and stuff. Yeah, so this is unfortunately aspect
I
of.
just want to do an aside as you mentioned that the at one of the restaurants where I work, the boss was actually from Dacheng. Well, he's not from Dacheng. His older brother was born there, but he was born in Taiwan. But the interesting thing about Dacheng is, when a lot of the military families came to Taiwan, they were given housing by the government. They set up these things called 眷村, which is like little villages of like
Military
military
family.
dependents and families.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dacheng, those people weren't military, but then they needed a place to stay. So then they were also like, set up by the government with housing and stuff. But the difference between Dacheng communities and 眷村 was 眷村 you had people from all sorts of places in China. So then the common language was standard Mandarin. But then with Dacheng, when everyone in their communities, even on Taiwan, were from the same place,
For
they could
people
still.
who need a little reminder, Dacheng is this group of islands that just off coast of Zhejiang province in southeastern China, and the KMT basically relocated the entire population of Dacheng to Taiwan during their evacuation in 1954.
55. The fight started 54, but the evacuation was 55.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
I said
but
it right.
so then, anyways, their dialect actually survived for like 2 generations, like 2 3 generations, like much longer than other like Huaisheng families. So then, like the restaurant owner, he actually speaks in that dialect to his siblings, or when he doesn't want his wife to understand what he's saying. And anyways, he speaks very good Hokkien. So then I asked him, I was like, well, you're you speak very good Hokkien, like better than a lot of Binseungren. And one of my coworkers, who was this older woman from Anhui, who I guess she doesn't understand the situation in Taiwan, was like, well, of course, he grew up in Taiwan, of course he's good at speaking it. So I said, not really. If you look at Ma Ying-jeou, who was the previous leader of Taiwan, he's from a Waiseng family, and he didn't speak Hokkien until he was running for president for so-called president. And you see that sort of class divide. So I asked him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, well, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth like a Ma Ying-jeou. When you go to someone else's turf," he was talking about Taiwan, you gotta adapt, otherwise you get your ass kicked. So I was like, so did you get your ass kicked? He was like, yeah, when I was a kid, I didn't speak Hokkien. I got my ass kicked for being a Waisengren.
Right, for being
So he was like,
the mainlander, right?
yeah.
But
So
for
he
the people who are not familiar with the terms, the Chinese terms.
Yeah. So I learned quickly, so I wouldn't get my ass kicked anymore. Anyways, around this time when Lei Zhen, who did Lei Zhen was kicked out of the party, there was this dude by the his name was Liao Wenyi, and he's considered by some to be the father of the Taiwan independence movement. I mean, there's like too many fathers of that movement.
Yeah.
Anyways, he forms the so-called provisional government of the Republic of Taiwan in Japan. Now, interestingly, at the meetings, you know what language was spoken?
What language?
Guess.
Japanese.
Yeah. How did you know? So I mean, yeah. And then instead of like writing the year and like using the Gregorian year or the Republican year,
he used the reign year of the Japanese emperor. No way.
Their documents like mark the year with the Showa year, Zhaohe.
Oh my god!
So basically, it was a clique of people who wanted Taiwan to be pretty much like the Manchurian puppet regime set up by the Japanese during World War II. So as you can see, there were bourgeois anti-KMT people, and they were split into two camps: the Free China types, and then the Taiwan independence types. And then the CCP kind of supports Chiang Kai-shek out of all these different camps of reactionaries in the context of reunification, because they're like better Chiang than like full-blown like bourgeois liberals.
The better the devil I know than
Yeah,
crazy.
We fought this bastard for this many decades. He's predictable. We know how to deal with him. We don't want to deal with all that other like these these Japanese worshipping separatists.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that all separatists are Japanese worshipping, but there is that element, and this is a case. So then Chiang Kai-shek sends people to Beijing once again to better understand their position. So then his main dude, this is really funny. His main dude he sends, his name is Song Yishan. He writes a report, and he basically says mainland China is doing quite well under the communists. So Chiang Kai-shek was pissed at his response, and he thinks Song Yishan had been turned into a communist. So he sends another guy named Cao Juren to his hometown to pay respects to his own ancestors, and then like Chiang Kai-shek's ancestors, and then report on the situation. And Cao Juren says Fenghua is better than before.
Which year was this?
Like 1955.
Okay, so this the date is important because as recollection from my own grandparents, right? The 1950s, or at least the early 1950s, were actually relatively good times compared to, the times that went before the Civil War and then the Japanese invasion. The hard times start to come after the Great Leap Forward, after 1959. Right, so that's why I asked what time you're talking about. So yeah, 19, according to my grandpa, on my mother's side, he said, the early 1950s were good times.
Even after the Great Leap Forward and stuff like that, I mean, I feel like it will be difficult to compare, but to like the time before liberation, because at least like People had schools to attend. They had, they had much more of a safety net than they ever did before, despite all the trials and tribulations and the errors of
Well, I
figuring out
mean,
what to do.
the reason I asked for the time is because people I know people
Yeah,
are just going to jump out of woodworks. Oh, what about the Great Leap Forward? Or what about the Great Famine? Right.
yeah. Well, this
So
is
that's why
before.
I was very specific, very specific, right? I mean, like this that this this happened before 1959. This was 1955. That totally makes sense, actually. It is better. It is much better than before, because what was before? Before it was Chinese Civil War, and before that was a Japanese invasion.
Yeah, and then so Chiang Kai-shek was at this point he was caught between the difficult choice of reunification and anti-communism, and at this point, it wasn't a great leap forward yet, but there was an anti-rightist campaign going on in the mainland, and Chiang Kai-shek felt that negotiations were a conspiracy to oust him after reunification.
Well, yeah, nobody said Chiang Kai-shek is not paranoid.
Yeah. So that,
He-
but then
he
like
did-
those people who Chiang Kai-shek tricked to Taiwan started missing their homes. So he figures if he starts preparing for a push back to the mainland, he can shift their attention so they stop being upset at home. So then he thought this was a time to really start carrying out his 反攻大陆 or recapture the mainland campaign. So, okay, on the side, like this, 反攻大陆 was still like official policy up until like the
1980s,
80s.
right?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
80s, but it wasn't actively pursued like after the 70s. So,
right,
but then like
right.
when my mom was growing, my mom was born in 1956. Like when she grew up, she had to like sing all of these like songs about recapturing the mainland and saving our mainland compatriots. Just
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
funny. But
yeah.
so then because the Sino-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty went into effect in 1955, the military aid increases, and then the U.S. sends 2,600 military advisors to Taiwan. And then I think we mentioned this last episode, the Liu Ziran incident.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
basically this Taiwanese guy. I don't know if he's like Taiwanese or like mainlander Taiwanese. Anyways, whatever. He's not.
KMT guy, KMT guy.
Anyways, he's not a Yang Guizi. He's not a
Yeah,
foreign devil. Anyways,
yeah.
they use him. They use his death. He was killed by an American to incite a mass anger to incite like mass anger against the U.S. and then to like try to bolster anti-U.S. sentiments and to pressure the U.S. to stop its conspiracy to replace Chiang Kai-shek.
Yeah,
And then
that's basically it. Because Chiang Kai-shek really used it as incident to kind of show
yeah,
off U.S. Like, look, I can whip up the anti-U.S. sentiment anytime I want. You better work with me.
yeah, and I think I kind of understand his great grandkid who was in the media a few years ago, right?
What happened?
Jiang Youqing. He
Yeah,
he was sent to court for emailing a death threat to his principal at the Taipei American School.
are you serious?
Yeah, he
Wait,
had this like breakdown. So, anyways, the way he acted is kind of like Chiang Kai-shek on like crack.
yeah,
He it was an American school because he grew up in North America for like 15 years before moving back to Taiwan.
yeah.
And he wrote, "You punk bitch, I hope you get fucked in prison." That was the email that he sent to his principal. And yeah,
Wow.
he's my favorite Chung, by the way. Anyways, that was
Wait,
kind of like
wait.
what Chiang Kai-shek did to the U.S. Like, you punk bitch, look what I can do.
Yeah. Wait, wouldn't that be his great grandchildren?
Yeah, his great grandkid.
Yeah, great grandkid. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that's all right.
So
Okay.
then he tells the Taiwanese people, like kind of with the U.S. as the true intended audience, that the recapture of the mainland and the anti-communist, anti-Soviet movement can be accomplished. Wait, no, I got this wrong. While he is inciting mass anger, at the same time, he is also telling the people that our anti-communist movement can't be accomplished without an alliance with the U.S. So
Yeah,
he's still like he's striking a balance so that the U.S. knows that he can incite mass anger, but that he was
he
whereas
got it under control. He's fine tuning. He's
yeah
fine tuning the nationalistic sentiment basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
but then he's also telling them, okay, my first priority is to fight communism though, so don't pull a Noriega on me.
Yeah, he is a little bit more competent than Noriega, in the
Oh
in that and also that U.S. needed him because U.S. no longer needed Noriega after the end of Cold War,
yeah.
and Chiang Kai Shek is lucky in that way. Uh,
So November 11th, there's a military drill in southern Taiwan with the Seventh Fleet. Seventh Fleet, by the way, reminder is the U.S. Navy. And then on November 28th, there was Chiang Kai-shek led like he started the largest military drill since 1949, and he also announces that he will increase the number of troops in Jinmen and Mazu. Now we're gonna fast forward to 1958 over here.
yes.
The so-called ROC Air Force begins flying over Yunnan, Guizhou, Sichuan, Qinghai, Fujian, Zhejiang. Like these are all Chinese provinces. Like
Yeah, I was one thing I was actually surprised to learn was that how extensive both the spy planes, the U.S. U-2 spy planes, and also the Taiwanese Air Force were able to penetrate the mainland China airspace. They were flying all over the place in the 50s.
on an
Um,
aside, when I was at the restaurant, there was this really old guy who actually fought in the Korean War, and he was asking like, like what parts of China I've been to and stuff. And he started telling me like all the different places in China he's in quotes been to. So then I asked
mhm.
him what he saw, and he was like, "Oh, I actually didn't see anything. I was flying planes."
Ah.
Yeah, and he started talking about how he was also a war pilot in the Korean War, and he talked about how scary the Soviet MiGs were.
Wait. He's American?
Yeah, he's American. It was work. He was a customer at the restaurant where I worked.
Ah, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. That
he had some
yes,
stories.
yes, yes.
I told him that he should visit Pyongyang though and see what it's like there. And I
Yeah,
showed him
yeah,
pictures, and he's like, "Wow, and that looks great." So,
yeah.
anyways,
Yeah, my elementary school in US, my elementary school homeroom teacher plus history teacher and also science teacher, both of them are fought in the Korean War. As
you're old.
on the US from the US side. This is my US elementary school. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, those planes were also dropping propaganda and other stuff, and But at this time, the U.S. once again starts pressuring Chiang Kai-shek to retreat from Jinmen and Mazu, since the U.S. doesn't want to involve itself in a war with mainland China. So you can see, like Mao was right about the U.S. being a paper tiger.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it talked big, it talked about anti-communists, but it's still like it's still tread very
Mao is
carefully.
Mao is he's a good judgment character when it comes to U.S. politicians and Khrushchev.
Yeah,
He got them dialed pretty good.
my favorite part was how when he met up with Khrushchev in Beijing, he knew that Khrushchev couldn't swim, so then he would tell Khrushchev to go talk to him at the pool while he like did like swimming tricks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
at this time, Mao decides that he wants to carry out an attack on the two islands in retaliation, but it was also a message to the world that the fate of those islands is an issue between the two Chinese governments and it's not an international affair. And then around that time, there was also stuff happening in the Middle East in July. After the Lebanese carried out an anti-U.S. struggle, the Iraqi people overthrew their feudal government, installed a people's democracy, which undermined imperialist interests in the Middle East. So then the U.S. and Britain, being the U.S. and Britain, decided to send forces to the Middle East, and then
Yeah,
later
this
in
was a lot of things were happening in the 1950s. First, there was a Suez Canal crisis when the British and the French sent the force trying to seize Suez Canal from Egypt, and then there's a Iranian government trying to nationalize the Anglo Persian oil company assets in Iran, and then U.S. Send in a Caltech professor to stage a coup, to put the Iranian Shah back in power. And so yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot of things were happening, and the U.S. was involved with around this time.
Yeah, and it's China knew that. So the on July 18th, the Central Committee decides to shell Jinmen, hoping to involve the U.S. to a certain degree, so that the U.S. would be forced to send some troops away from the Middle East to the Taiwan Strait. But they decide to hold off the attack and see what happens first in the Middle East. But Chiang Kai-shek had pretty good intelligence, so he started noticing that the PLA had very highly unusual activities, like getting stationed in like Fuzhou and Xiamen, and basically all those areas surrounding Jinmen and Mazu. So he starts preparing, and in August, the so-called ROC Air Force planes, the Chiang Kai-shek's, the KMT's Air Force that flew into the Fujian Zhejiang area were shot down. So then the U.S. condemns Mao, and Mao's just like, well, you know what? It's time to shell Jinmen and Mazu. So then August 23rd, 1958, the Battle of Jinmen begins. And Mao pretty much tells his guys that we're attacking Jinmen to give Chiang Kai-shek an excuse to reject the U.S.'s advice to retreat from Jinmen and Mazu. Not necessarily because we want to liberate Taiwan at this moment. And Eisenhower, being the coward that he was, says that we should let the Asians fight Asians, and that white Americans should not get involved and become the enemy of the Asian people. So you can see like the U.S. still cared about its PR. So Eisenhower's thing was the U.S. will defend Taiwan and provide weapons, but it will not fight in Jinmen or Mazu. At the same time, the U.S. starts sending warships and shit to the Taiwan Strait, including materials meant for the Middle East, just as Mao expected. So at this point, the PLA is at a loss as to whether or not to engage. So then Mao comes up with the solution, which was to engage, but to only fire at KMT ships and to leave the U.S. ships alone, even if they fire. There were multiple intentions. One of them was to kind of test the U.S. to see how committed the U.S. was at defending Taiwan, and the U.S. does not fire back at the PLA as a result. The other is he's sending a message saying that this is a domestic issue, not an international issue, so we're not going to acknowledge the presence of Americans. So then through the Battle of Jinmen, Mao discovered that there is a definite limit on the level of mutual assistance, which is the U.S. was definitely not willing to risk war with mainland China, and that the U.S. wants Chiang Kai-shek to retreat from Jinmen and Mazu. And then, the U.S. being the U.S. once again threatened to use nukes in Xiamen, but they didn't. And then, do you want to kind of finish this off about like the implications of the war and what happened? I mean, it's not as interesting after this.
I mean, yeah, the war, the battle in Chinese was known as Wan Pao Hong Jinmen, literally 10,000 artillery piece bombarding.
Probably much more than that, but in Chinese, like one just like means 10,000, and it just means like a lot.
Yeah, lots of artillery pieces bombarding Kinmen Island, and the bombarding of Kinmen Island actually became like a routine where they will like start bombarding on the odd days or even days, and
the Chiang Kai-shek's the Taiwan side would bombard the mainland on like the other days.
Yes,
it was very It was very coordinated. Like, so it was obvious to both sides that it wasn't a real fight. It was like a show to pretty much tell the U.S. that, hey, this is still a hot zone. This is the Chinese Civil War still going on, so you can't separate Taiwan from the rest of China.
And then there will be like they will send over like propaganda balloons like both the mainland and the Taiwan side will send over like balloons carrying over like gifts, and also with propaganda poster to the other side. And this was going on up to 1980s basically,
But the
because
shelling stopped in 1979
yes, yes,
on, I think, the first. That's when Deng Xiaoping decided to stop it.
yes, yes. And then I think that the propaganda war still went on in the 80s. I think I remember when I was in China in 80, at least the propaganda war was still going on. And because that this is a lot of the Chinese, also the Taiwanese, would know about this event. And also the as you mentioned before, there were so many shells, landed in Kinmen, and they were fashioned from the shells to fashion a meat cleaver for kitchen use. So supposedly they're very good because they're made from good material. I don't know. I just heard it's a
I
thing.
heard that. I heard they're very very well made, but I think I'm not sure if the shell. I feel like at some point they're gonna run out of shells.
Now, yeah, I mean it's been like 20 years. I mean last shelling happened in what 1979, so it's been a while. It's been
Yeah,
uh
Jinmen
oh,
at this point is known for two things: the knives and their liquor.
yes, it's kind of it's interesting because Xiamen now is like a big city, right? And Jinmen is still kind of like a rural area. I mean,
It's good
it's
for one
hard.
thing. I have a friend in Xiamen who wanted to see Joker, which is banned in mainland China. So what she did was she took a boat to Jinmen to watch it, and then went back to Xiamen.
Oh yeah, because under Ma Ying-jeou now there's like direct communication, right, between Xiamen and Jinmen. There's you can just take a ferry, right?
Yeah, Shaosantong. It's apparently very convenient.
Yeah, yeah, and then the shot. Then for a while, before 80s, before the ending of the tension, Sham like the development of Shaman was kind of hold off because that was supposed to be like a battlefront, right? But after 80s, because they wanted to the Chinese
Attract
government wanted.
Taiwanese investors.
Yeah, they wanted to attract Taiwanese investor, and they also wanted to develop Xiamen as kind of like the window front, right, for to of China. So now Xiamen is quite developed. It's a very nice coast city, uh, and there's some nice resort area around there too. There's
Yeah,
a
it's
long
pretty.
beach.
It's quite pretty, but
Yeah.
like, I decided to go there once when I was living in Taiwan, and then I was like, man, this is too similar to Taiwan. I feel like I wasted my money. Like the old people talking sounded like almost exactly the same as like old people in Taiwan.
Yeah, because the language is very similar,
Yeah.
and then there also the but on the Jinmen side, now people in for Chinese tourists, if they want to see that kind of in their mind, the traditional China, right? They go to Jinmen
Oh,
because
by the way,
Jinmen.
I sent when I went to China in December and January, I sent Pang Zai a bottle of Jinmen Gaoliang.
Oh, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
I wonder if he's gonna chug it.
Okay.
I should
Oh,
have sent him two, so then he can chug one of them and keep the other one.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's great. That's great stuff.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, on the note of Pangzai and the liquor, I think it's a good time to end this for now.
Yeah, yeah. I
Because
guess
we
next time we can talk about the trend, like kind of the rest of the Chiang Kai Shek era. I think over here we pretty much explained the context of Taiwan
yes,
in relation to like the U.S. imperialists and in
yes,
relation to mainland China and to a lesser extent, Soviet Union, Korea, Japan, and all that. So I think next time we might talk about some of the economic development and also like some of Chiang Kai-shek's policies. But then I think the bulk of it will be the changes during the Jiang Jingguo era.
yes. I'm actually more interested to hear about like anecdotal stories, maybe personal stories about Jiang Jingguo's
I don't have
Taiwan.
any because I was born in 1993.
I forgot. I forgot. I'm a fucking Gen Xer.
Yeah.
You're a millennial. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's okay. We'll manage.
But I
Like, cause
think growing up in the 90s, I spent a lot of my summers in Taiwan, and I think in the 90s it was
you mean
still.
you're not gonna have some Teresa Dance 10 story for me? Then Li Jun.
I mean, I feel like I feel like you'll have more than I do.
Okay, for people who don't know, like in the 80s, there are two famous Dens in China. One is Deng Xiaoping, of course, and the other one is what people call Little Den. That's the Teresa Ten, who is a Taiwanese singer who was
There was a saying in mainland China, like we listen to Deng Xiaoping by day and we listen to Deng Lijun at night.
yeah, and Deng Lijun was actually she was actually employed by the Taiwanese intelligence at one point to broadcast propaganda to mainland. So that was interesting too. Anyway, yeah, we'll talk about all that when we
Yeah.
come back.
I think the
Yeah.
next episode will be even more interesting because that's we're gonna really get into things like the Taiwan independence movement, the opposition against the
Yeah.
KMT, and this and
Yes.
that.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I think next episode will be the one that our friends, the one who shared your link previously and talked a lot of shit, will have a lot to say.
Wait,
'Cause there's not much
who's
to
that?
argue. There's not much to argue with like what we said in the last episode because it was such a long time ago. Let me see. Let me pull it up. I want to show you the
Yeah, what did they say? I mean, literally, I was just talking about the history of like prehistory of Taiwan and the history of Koshinga's war against Dutch. I mean, like, how is that controversial? I mean, I don't
he just
know.
got mad. I'll just read you the things. I think okay, we're gonna end the podcast on like me reading mean comments. How about that?
Okay, yeah.
So shit. Let me see. Let me see my phone. I think it's on my phone. Okay. Okay. So there is this guy. His name is Ye Yilun. He's like this
Okay,
Taiwanese. I think he's a Hapa. It doesn't
okay,
matter. He
okay.
shares our episode, the previous one, the preview, not even the full episode,
Yeah, yeah,
into a
yeah.
group called Taiwan History, and he says, "Are Chankies reaching the point?" And then one of the commenters, Michael Turton, says, "What do either of those CCP zombies know?" And
Oh,
then
Michael Turden. Oh my God, he's like
you know
American
him.
guy living in Taiwan, and he runs this website called The View from Taiwan, and he's a big DDP supporter. Uh,
Okay,
that
then Michael Turton, you understand this? What Okay,
guy.
I'm done.
Okay.
Okay, so then Ye in response to that Taiwan has been repeatedly colonized and the ROC is the latest iteration. Okay, and then and then another guy, Ben Salerno comments, Tinky takes can ruin my whole day, so I'm afraid to listen. What are the main takeaways? Ye says Taiwan has had a long history of colonization and the ROC is the latest iteration. I've always wanted to do a podcast series on. Oh, he's just copying and pasting what you wrote. So then Ben Salerno says, had to use Wayback Machine for Xiangyu's suspended Twitter. It only shows a handful of posts where he's being a North Korea boo. So he's confirmed for being a tryhard if nothing else. Dude, man, if you had family that got like separated and almost killed during the Korean War, you would think differently. So fuck you. And I'm gonna that was an aside. I just dread discovering him doing the typical tanky thing where, after accurately describing historical imperialism, totally reverses course for the modern day to say some shit about how the CCP should take Taiwan by force or whatever because Red Flag Man said so. Well, I never said that in the previous episode. And the fact that you're describing imperialism as historical imperialism says that you don't think it exists anymore. So big fuck you to you. And okay, yeah,
Yeah,
those are like the end of my.
these are some really nasty intersection of like the American expats and in Asia and some like Taiwan uh, separatist. I mean,
I'm not gonna say
it's
too much about Ye Lun because I think he's like part indigenous and he's looking at it from that perspective. But
okay.
the fact that he's just putting words into my mouth, come on, man. Cariña.
Yeah. Okay. On that note, let's end the show today. And when we come back, we will dive more into the contentious Taiwan politics, Taiwan in 1980s and to the democratic transition.
I think you'll have a lot of stories to share since you grew up during that time. You probably heard a lot.
I was in Chongqing, man. I was in Chongqing.
So,
I was a preteen in Chongqing. Okay.
all right, all right. Good to be on
You
again.
guys
Good
just
to
have to
talk to
wait.
everybody. I'll see you guys next time, hopefully soon, and I hope you feel better. And hey,
Yes.
maybe you have the latest in-demand antibodies and you don't know yet.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you for listening, and thank you for joining the show again, Xiangyu.
Oh, no problem.
Bye bye.
Bye.